Okay. What's the topic?
Tonight we're gonna discuss forgiveness.
Forgiveness.
Yeah.
Okay. In relationship to anything specific, or?
Well, it's a very simple and yet complex issue
Okay.
topic. You know, I struggled with it for a long time. I wanted to hold grudges, not like people because they did something, and it's one of those things that kept me, getting further and further into kind of maladaptive and negative thought patterns, cycles, and stuff. I think, and so, when I first got clean, I learned about this concept. I mean, it kind of goes back to the concept that you can think whatever you want, whenever you want about any situation,
Mm-hmm.
And so, I had troubles with acceptance and accepting other people, their flaws, things. I had this issue with perfection, thinking I was, I should be perfect, and I expected that of myself. And when I wasn't, I got some kind of disappointment, and I projected those expectations on other people, and it kind of had this negative feedback cycle where I was just, disappointed all the time because, obviously nobody's perfect. So,
Yeah.
so that, I got this. We watched this video, and it was by Brene Brown, and it was about forgiveness and shame or something like that. And there's this concept that you can, understand that everybody around you is doing the best with what they have, and it really kind of takes the wind out of the sails of blaming everyone for anything that doesn't go your way. And it's really kind of a, I don't want to say selfish, but prideful or egotistical standpoint to say that, that somebody shouldn't have done what they did because you don't have all the information that they have. They use the example of like getting cut off on a roadway. You get mad at that driver thinking they don't know that you're there and they don't care or they're stupid or whatever. And, you don't know what's going on in that car.
Yeah.
You don't know if they saw something or if, somebody punched them in the face. I mean, there could be so many different answers. And so it really brought a new perspective to, me going forward and blaming other people for things that I think they did to me. And so I, created my own personal, what it means to me and how I try and practice it. And, blame has always been an interesting thing for me anyway, because I don't always think it's helpful to blame for the past, except to identify an issue and fix it going forward. So, that's just the minimum, I guess, of what I think about when I think about the topic. It's you can simply say you forgive somebody, but do you really? That's it's hard to answer. I think sometimes for some people.
Yeah, I mean, so you touched on a lot of different things, and so I'm going to try and keep up with what you said and stay on topic. But as far as blaming people for things that they're doing, I know this mantra of, it's not my fucking business has really helped me. And coming to this realization that everybody's fucked up. And so we have this natural tendency in the world we're living in to be very selfish and shallow. And so everybody makes these decisions with this very narrow lens. And once I started doing my self-actualization work, doing my program and kind of digging deeper into challenging my beliefs and how I show up for people and what I want, just trying to become that person that attracts the things that I want, you know what I mean? And when I realized that, you can't take things personal. And I've been practicing that a lot too, but that helps me, right? Like, don't take things too personally. And that's in one of the it's in the book called The Four Agreements. It's one of the agreements in that book where you're intentionally supposed to be making sure that you're not stepping out of your side of the street. And that's what it reminds me of when you're talking about this idea of blaming and then reacting because things aren't going your way. But one thing I will say is, from coming from an abusive childhood, not having proper standards or just a healthy framework of expectations in relationships, it's very helpful for me to identify whose fault the end result is, right? So if I had an interaction with a couple people, I need to know. We let him out. Fucking shit. It's our cat. He's thinks everything's an emergency, and he's spoiled. So, but what was I saying? I was saying, yeah.
Fault.
So yeah, it was important. It's important for me to continue to identify that because I have these natural tendencies to enable and to clean up other people's sides of the street. And so for me, it's not so much a blaming, but this identifying of that's not my business, and that's actually your insecurity or your character defect. Like, that's not my shit to own. And so that allows me to kind of release it and not take ownership of the situation or the outcome, because like everybody, I get attached to these outcomes that I think I should achieve or receive immediately, and that it actually doesn't really work out most of the time.
So just, I don't know, you have more? Because I just wanted to jump in because that was an interesting thing about, why you want to know, who or how a situation occurred, and, who's responsible.
Mm-hmm.
That's, I'm all for finding out if there's some person who's making terrible decisions and, fucking me over in the process, and I shouldn't be associated with them in the future. That's a different thing than just getting mad at somebody, for something they did. So I guess
think it's levels. There are levels.
Yeah,
and I'm just hyper aware of my story, and so that's something I need to practice. It's a practice I do regularly, and daily. But that's not something that like every person needs to be doing. It's just specifically with an abusive background, more specifically a childhood background. Overcoming or nurturing yourself as an adult, we have different things that we need to do to maintain our health.
Right.
But, thinking that I'm perfect, I wanted to go back to like your standards, right? We hold ourselves to these high standards. Like, I think I should be excellent and I should hit the ball and get on base every fucking time. Just as an example, like, I honestly, I'm like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
I'll show up and practice. How much do I have to practice? I'm down. And so this is like these unrealistic expectations that I have. And then after I ramp myself up and then let myself down, I have to go through this process of forgiveness. Which is like, I feel like it's like a setup just to make sure I'm practicing it. Just to make sure I'm on my game. Let's go through this roller coaster. Yeah. It's been a week.
What was it you said the other day? Softball sure teaches you a lot about yourself.
I'm telling you. Yeah, and I think that's true for any hobby, right? Any hobby that someone's passionate about gives you opportunities to learn more about yourself.
Right. If it's competitive, especially.
Well, it doesn't have to be competitive. You can compete with yourself.
Yeah.
Right. If you're a competitive person, everything's competitive.
Right.
Yeah. So.
I was thinking of like knitting or doing models or something.
I'll fuck up some knitting. I'll make the best fucking gloves.
Fast as possible.
Everybody sit down. That's crazy. Yeah. But it's my shit.
But you're serious.
It's not even serious. It's my shit. And that's fine, right? I don't expect everybody else to be like that. And I know that, when I'm looking around, I'm like sweating because I'm ready to go and everybody's super relaxed. It's probably time for me to take a moment and check in. What's my motivation? Is this appropriate for the situation? Yeah, because when I was writing, I was going over like some self-esteem notes today, and as I was writing like about self-assertiveness, the ability to assert yourself into situations and feel comfortable and to feel like valued, like you deserve to do that.
Sit down.
Now it's messy. Oh, you deserve to do that. And oh darn it, I just lost what I was saying.
Assertiveness?
Yeah, we'll get back to it. I'm sure it'll come up. They weren't ready for it, I think. Yeah. Anyways. But yeah, it's a process of self-forgiveness. I think when it comes to forgiving other people, that's challenging because it goes into boundaries, right? Like, if you're going to have to continue to forgive someone, why, is that a standard issue? Is it a value issue? Is it insecurity? Like, why do you keep having them in your life if you constantly have to forgive them? That's pretty weak. It's unnecessary pain. And I'm like pain to me is a big deal, because I've lived with chronic pain for so long, and just recently have I been able to overcome it in my mind. But I started out in pain, and so it's like, why would you choose to be in pain? If you have the ability to live consciously and in the moment, and not be living your life by old programs and old memories, then why not just put the little bit of work into it to create this happier, healthier life? So.
Yeah, I mean, as you've reflected back to me a few times, I don't trust many people, and which means I don't put myself in situations where I'm allowing people to, fuck me over very often. So I don't have a lot of experience with that. I have, been in an abusive relationship. I've had somebody, you know, emotionally abuse me. And so, I've been there. And that's probably a lot of why my, guard is up kind of all the time, analyzing motives, intentions, awareness, somebody else's awareness level, about if they, what they really think they look like out there.
Yeah, well, and also you've been a snake yourself, right? I mean, like, for me, like, I know exactly what to look for, because I feel like I was better than some of the people that are trying to run game. And I'm like, gotta work on that. Like, good try. You know what I mean? Just because it's not just, like, the abuse adds a second level, but also I was out there running some mad game.
Yeah, I mean...
You're like, nope.
I mean, always, right?
Yeah. I could tell that you even today, you had some resistance against trusting me or just being authentically honest about how you felt.
Yeah, I couldn't tell if I felt worse than normal.
So Kyle has not been feeling the greatest today. And I mentioned, hours before the incident took place, that I'm like, how are you feeling? And he's like, I feel fine. I'm like, okay, well, you look about 50%. Like, you don't even look, okay. Just as a heads up, you're not looking too hot. He's like, oh, okay. And he'd just been, like, really foggy. And then we went to the store. He lost track of where we were going a couple times, and then broke the keys to the car and was like, I don't know. And I'm like, go in the store, get the stuff, and I'll find the key. And as I'm looking for the key, I'm like, this motherfucker, like, what the fuck? I'm like working myself up. And then I just realized, I'm like, it's really my fault, because I knew you weren't feeling well. And you have like this masculine energy where like, I'm like macho and I'm just gonna do it all. And I'm like, I should have been like, no. So then when you came back out, I'm like, I'm driving, done with that. But it allowed me to just, work through it, because I was getting irritated.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting how long it takes for me to admit to myself that I might be off a little.
Oh my God, yeah. So the minute you came out, I'm like, so, if you're not, if I can't expect 100% from you, you need to let me know. Because I expect that shit for myself. And it's super unrealistic to always be on your game. But, I'm used to that with you, because we reflect and constantly have these deep conversations. It's like just an ongoing thread. Our dialogue doesn't stop about it. And so people watching, they might think like this just turns on in the video, but these are how our conversations go all day. Right. And so it's just another opportunity for me to assert myself, right, in our relationship. I like to we have a really equal balance, power exchange in our relationship, contrary to like dom and sub relationships, where the dominant person, like a dom, is always in charge and the sub person follows them around and takes orders or direction. It's really direction. But we pass the exchange and the power pretty regularly. And so it was great because that was an opportunity for me. You know what I mean? And so I had to kind of work through forgiving myself on that because I was just sitting here writing, like being a boss, writing all this shit about how to assert yourself, and then I didn't even do it. I'm like, okay. But like Joe Dispenza says, like the reaction will happen to life regardless. It's how long you stay in it.
Right.
And so that's great progress for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I just had something that reminded me of. I lost it though.
Great. I have another side topic to talk
Great.
about. Good. Boundaries. When to excuse people from your life.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. So like we get in these stories. Well, what I found is that people who I have interacted with years ago, like when I was in my active addiction and before I'd just done a lot of this self development and growth, they know a different Lakin. They know a past Lakin, a Lakin who was very manipulative. I got what I wanted. I was very scared. I was very insecure, and so that came out in unhealthy and unproductive cycles and behaviors, and my relationships were not this even power exchange. It was not like that. And so when I'm dealing with people in the past who haven't seen me over the years, they have this story of me, and I'm completely different today. And so I run into people where they treat me as if I'm still this person.
Not just people that you've known for, I mean, we won't get into specifics,
Yeah.
but a long time.
Yeah, people I have a history with. It's probably fair to say. And I especially noticed this with my family. Oh my God, that was a hard one because I started changing who I was and what I was doing for the good. But my family saw me as labeled kind of who I used to be. And so reframing the way other people experience me was pretty difficult because that's not entirely all my responsibility, right? Like that's their responsibility too.
Yeah, I mean, it just reaffirms the thing we talk about all the time about like what kind of programs people are on. People see what they want to see. For the a lot of people, a lot of the time, see what they want to see and not, or what they expect to see.
Let me break that down real fast. They look for evidence that validates the emotional frequency that they hold. That emotional frequency comes from the past experiences that have traumatized them, right? Because it's like burned into your psyche. And so what we do with our memory bank is that we look for confirmation that those memories are still true because it's about survival, right? And so we're trying to validate that they're still, current or up to date or efficient for our lives. And so people who have not came to terms with some of their old pains or wounds, or have not adapted or grown on a spiritual level, emotional level, or everybody has issues from their childhood, whatever it is, and at that point in their childhood, the pendulum swings, right? And so an experience to one kid might not be as traumatic to me, but it is to them because that's the most pain they've ever dealt with. So it's an extreme pain for them. And so when they carry that into adulthood and they don't deal with it or develop new coping skills, they stay in that emotional vibrational frequency and they pull experiences towards them because they're looking for that, right? If you don't trust people, then you're looking for situations where people are gonna, fuck you over or lie to you, right? You're looking for that. And so in an environment where that only happens like 2 out of 100 times, you will find those 2 times. And so that's kind of the idea, yeah. So it's frustrating dealing with that, because it's like I was working through it today with Kyle and I had to talk out loud about, that's not who I am today. And that's the story that this other person is telling themselves. And I really don't have much control over that. I can just show up as my best self and maintain my boundaries, and just, for me, if someone accuses me to be someone I'm not, there's only so many times I'm going to deal with that, right? And I've noticed that even with friends, even with, has nothing to do with drugs and alcohol, right? You show up in a friend group and your friends might tease you because you're, this type of person in the friend group. But if you ever want to break out of that shell, people get uncomfortable because they're trusting you to be consistent and show up the way you've always shown up. And so whether you're changing for good or bad, people in your circle feel threatened by it.
Yeah. On a separate, kind of similar but different. Where, I've seen memes where people say, it's not selfish to do what's best for you. Um, it's not your business. There's a million different ways to tell somebody you're busy every single time they ask. You can also be honest and be like, I don't feel like you're the healthiest person for me to hang out with. So how you tell somebody is maybe the most difficult part, but I can assure anyone, having done it, that the anticipation or fear of actually communicating it is the worst part.
Oh, it feels so good when you get the courage to do it, though. It feels so good, and that's hard. It's so hard.
And it will come up, depending on your relationship with that person. It'll come up for you because things will remind you of them. And this happened for me recently, and it's happened.
Excited to hear what you're gonna say. That's all.
Well, I was gonna say that this is another example of the story you're telling yourself coming up. We talked about this last night. Video didn't work.
Oh, FYI, we did a killer video. Kyle recorded it in slow-mo.
Did not, but
it turned
iCloud was full because you have 4 million videos on your phone.
Well, not blaming. But it wasn't my shit. It wasn't my responsibility.
What?
It wasn't. I didn't do the camera. Anyways.
Okay. Good.
So we talked about the story you tell yourself.
Right, because I would say that you accurately pointed out that I probably hadn't dealt with, making up a healthy story for myself to deal with some of the shit that went on in the relationship.
So, just briefly, Kyle ran into someone from his past, and not just ran into him. We went out to a family dinner, and they ended up sitting at the table right next to us. And we had just sat down, and so it was a solid 40 minutes. Pretty uncomfortable. Energy for sure, but
yeah, because they didn't even acknowledge me.
Well, I don't think that that's the issue. However, Kyle has some, stuff he hasn't gotten over with that specific person. Some old wounds, some old traumas, and he hasn't had the opportunity to fully integrate it, which for me means release the energy, power, the emotional power behind, a specific incident or relationship in order to free yourself from it. And so that person ended up sitting right next to him and us, and so that's what he's talking about. It came blaring, is that a word, blaring? Mm-hmm. Blaring in his face, because I believe the universe presents you with things that you need to work through when you're ready, and if you are ignoring it, it will get louder and louder and louder until you deal with it.
Yeah, and ironically, the thing that needed to happen was for it needed to happen in front of you, because I wouldn't have ever come up with a new explanation. I would have just been like,
pissed.
Look.
Yeah, he was really having a tough time.
I'm sweating right now.
Yeah, he was having a tough time. He started to shut down, which is, I've only seen him do that 1 or 2 other times. And so, I was trying very nurturing to bring it up and to just encourage him to identify the story that he's telling himself about those past events, because since that interaction had happened initially, since the pain in his memory, there's been quite a bit of time in between. And so Kyle's changed into a completely different person, and so has this other person. They are new people. And so it was very clear that, they're holding on to these past memories of who they were when they interacted together. Ironically, they're both different people today, and they were different people back then. right? And so when that happens, you have to create a new story because our perspective today is different than when it was. And so a really easy one, a go-to one for me to offer some forgiveness and acceptance of my own past is to say, you know, my experience will benefit others. Uh, what was yours?
Mine is that I wouldn't be right here had that not happened.
Absolutely.
So, it serves a purpose, and whatever has gotten you to where you're at, you should honor. Right?
Absolutely, yeah. Whether it's good or bad, you should not should. It's important to honor it for what it was because when you go into like the trenches of pain, it allows you to come up that much higher for pleasure. It really does. And it offers, like, this unique situation offers a connection for us to bond with. Right. Because we both have experienced something similar. And so without that, we would have, a disconnect on that.
And that brings us back to forgiving older versions of you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You were doing the best with what you had then. If you knew what you knew now, you probably wouldn't do it anymore. But you didn't have that information. So
and what it was like shame, a bunch of shame came up.
Guilt.
Anger, guilt. Guilt came up a bunch.
Guilt, it's again anxiety and guilt. That's how I experience guilt, is like anxiety. So
and that sucks.
It's a pit in my stomach.
Uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's very uncomfortable. But could be a lot worse.
Yeah, and you moved through it, right? You didn't live in it.
No.
You could wake
temporary.
up. Yeah, you could. Pain is temporary. Suffering is optional.
Yeah. And today, that's the worst of it for me. It's worse, crazier things have happened than having some. I don't want to say serious because I'm sure people have way worse anxiety, but a pit in my stomach for maybe an hour or so.
I call them princess problems. Right?
Yeah.
Just in the perspective of things, it's a princess problem. Right. For me, because things have been a lot worse and can be, and I see it. I don't need to look for the information anywhere. Like, I know.
Right.
So it gives me a little bit of gratitude. But did you manage to like overcome or rewrite that story that you had with that specific traumatic relationship or person, or is it like an ongoing process? What can you just explain what that looks like? You're still working on it, like.
Well, it's been coming up fairly frequently, and every time I've just been rewriting the story.
Since you saw them?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I'm just keep, before I wasn't reframing at all. I would just be like, forget.
Try and block it out. Try and numb it.
Just compartmentalize, karate move in my brain.
Yeah.
And so now I've been, able to just have that kind of change that story a little bit. And, I don't avoid it as much. I let it come up and I let myself talk to myself about it. Mm-hmm. And try and use it, because like you said, it's something that somebody else is dealing with out there, and I'm fortunate enough to have somebody else to talk to about it that can give me new information that I didn't think of myself, and then talk about it to people who may or may not be watching or listening.
Yeah, it's really cool that you're not drinking too, or using drugs, because when we do something, like if we're feeling uncomfortable because we get triggered by whatever event, the minute we have the first drink or digest certain chemicals, it allows us to escape it immediately. And when you compartmentalize like that, using additional additives, it takes longer to go back into those compartments, right? And so what happens is that they build and build and build and build and build, because you get in this habit of just like shelving it, tabling.
Well, that's probably why it's so extreme.
And it's like,
really.
Yeah, and then it just comes out on
because
people.
I experienced it doing all kinds of other drugs and drinking.
Yeah,
and
so you
shoving
just
it down.
put it
And
away,
I
put
didn't
it away.
have that. I was numb.
Yeah.
I was numb. So now I'm experiencing the same thing I would have experienced without it. And
Yeah.
so I have to deal with it now. Because I wouldn't have had to then.
You get to deal with it.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, you get to have the conversations where before, I mean, for me, I didn't have those conversations. I was just so uncomfortable. I didn't have them. So that's good.
Yeah.
And once you start, I just want to add this because we're pretty much out of time. Once you start having the conversations with yourself, it opens up the door to have the conversations with other people.
Right.
You know, and then that's where you can start setting and establishing and maintaining healthy boundaries. And just as a quick one, if you're trying to establish and maintain boundaries with someone else, like, it's a practice. It's not a one time and you're done. I mean, very few times have I been able to set one boundary and have it be done. Generally, it's this ongoing relationship with, you know, touching back down and reframing and re-acknowledging a boundary. And so that's important because I didn't really know that when I started. And boundaries are with yourself just as much as other people. Just as much. So
right.
I'm assuming that you probably have set a boundary about kind of reframing stories, or at least evaluating the past now, since you just went through this.
I mean, yeah, simply. I mean, I've forgiven myself for pretty much everything, you know, but I hadn't had that come up like that, and so it hadn't really been necessary. But yeah, I guess I don't really know what you're asking me.
I was just stating that you probably, so for me, boundaries can be soft and hard, and when you're setting them with yourself, it's just basically like promising to make a practice or some sort of standard so that you don't set yourself up for failure or overload of emotion again, right? So you protect yourself from being in this heightened state of anxiety by choosing to face and evaluate the stories that you're writing in real time, and when things come up from the past, right? So a boundary for me would be like, every time I get presented with guilt, shame, or anxiety from my past actions, I'm going to sit down and have a conversation with myself about it. I'm not going to let a second go by where I table it.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and it's like, done.
I've made it a pretty serious practice to make sure I don't have to experience those feelings in recovery. Because, I mean, that's basically most of my program. It's just like doing the right thing and making sure nothing bad happens. Like, that's my program, like, on its...
Yeah, and that's kind of a little hard.
It's hard. It's
Possibly
not possible. It's,
unrealistic.
well, I shouldn't say making yes. The way I said it. Yeah.
And the language, so like, it's funny, he's a stickler in language, great writer, very good at definitions, like dictionary definitions, not real life different, you know, definitions. Anyways, okay, I lost it.
But you didn't like what I said.
Yeah, it's important to be very specific with the words that you use, because every word, like, I have to do something or I get to do this, it changes the emotional frequency behind the statement. So for Kyle, he manhandles it intellectually and will just kind of work through everything. We call them word salads in the house, where he just like overloads himself with this logical perspective and reasoning behind why what he's doing is the right way. But I'm an emotional being, and each sentence has an emotional charge. You can say one sentence and then think, you know, feel it. What does it feel like? And so some sentences can come from a really limited point of view, where other ones are more expansive, more like all-inclusive, basically. Some are very inclusive. Yeah, so that's
right. So if I wrote that sentence and then read it, I'd be like, I'm not saying that to anybody.
And I was like, delete, edit. So closing thoughts?
No. No, I think we covered quite a bit.
Yeah, so just to go over, we started talking about self-forgiveness and then moved into this idea of boundaries and standards, and the practice of reframing the old stories from your past. And so when you do all of that together, right? We kind of took you around the circle, but that's all the work we do with any given situation that we feel unhappy with. So there's lots of work that goes into it, but when you practice it enough, there's like this gradual progression that just happens because you know what the next step is and you can just feel it, right?
Yeah, I guess that reminds me of like maybe one more thing, but that's a whole nother
Whole nother video?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's it.